Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of the Arsenal News Show, joining you every morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you so much for joining us and making this, of course, a continued part of your morning routine, wherever you happen to be in the world. Thank you so much for the continued support. Do drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on, as we try desperately to close in on that 40,000 subscriber mark. Maybe we can get there by the end of the year. That'd be quite cool if that's even feasibly possible. I did look at kind of the analytics the other day, and apparently 62% of you are subscribed, which means that 38% of the people that are watching the video haven't clicked the button. Maybe you've done it by mistake and you just kind of search for it every morning. You know, if you click that subscribe button, it really does help. And if you turn the notifications on as well, it should, if YouTube is awake, tell you when we do our other shows as well. Let's jump into the chat box. Good morning to Matt G, to Blackshine, to Stephen and Tarmid. Good morning to Damien and Olu and Sarvik and Martin and Lynn. Hope you're doing good. Peter, that comment made me laugh. I'm going to be real. Stevie, good morning to you. Steve and Paul and Kaiser and Michael, good morning, and everybody else joining us in the chat box as well. I hope you've had a fantastic week. Welcome to the weekend. I hope that you've got some good stuff planned, because what you won't have planned is anything football related, unfortunately. But we'll talk a little bit about that and some more in a second. There is other sport going on to indulge ourselves in, but it is a shame. But we'll come on to that, as I say. Do check out the last remaining tickets in our prize for Henry and Bergkamp's signed and framed shirts. There's also the opportunity to win an instant prize, which is the Arsenal home, away, or third kit of your choice. There is only 21 tickets left, and the competition runs out on Wednesday. Sorry, so do make sure that you get involved before your opportunity flies by. The first thing to talk about, and I know that we were talking about this yesterday, but obviously we did the reaction to the game yesterday, so there's a few things we're going to go over for the last 48 hours. The Premier League confirms that this weekend's game, so Arsenal's match against Everton, would be postponed. They released a statement in which they said, at a meeting in this morning's Premier League clubs paid tribute to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II to honour her extraordinary life and contribution to the nation. And as a mark of respect, this weekend's Premier League match round will be postponed, including Monday evening's game. Further updates regarding the Premier League fixtures during the period of mourning will be provided in due course. I am frustrated by this. Really, I am frustrated by this because, and I wrote a piece about this yesterday, it's a topic which is going to divide people. But I think that the overriding frustration that has been felt and shown and voiced and written by so many people kind of highlights that this, in my view, was the wrong decision. I mean, as a unified kind of motion of all sporting events done this, then I would be less frustrated. But when you see rugby and horse racing and cricket and golf and I think Formula One, although I know that's more international than national, I know, but still, when all of these sports continue and it's football that doesn't, as a sign of what they describe as respect, it's difficult to kind of get your head around. I think that, and I wrote about this in my piece this morning, you know, when it comes to trying to discuss this sort of topic, it's hard because obviously the decision has been made to try and show respect for the passing of our monarch, which is obviously, you would say, and if any way that you can try and show respect is a good thing. But there are going to be people out there that will be at home alone, won't be around with their family and friends like they might have been if they're at the football, and won't be given the same opportunity to have a moment of reflection, a moment of respect, to pay tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. And because of that, that's a real shame. And that's only one part of this. Another part of it is obviously the fact that people have paid for travel, people have paid for accommodation, people have come from abroad to watch the game this weekend. I had someone message me yesterday saying it was going to be their first Premier League game and they were coming from Australia. And now that, of course, has had a huge impact on their trip and their time. They're not going to cancel their trip because one of the activities is no longer there. But that investment that's there, they can't just come back when the game's been rearranged. It's very difficult. And so that's a frustration. And so I think it's absolutely fair that people have their criticism of the decision. And but if it's your opinion that is that they've made the right choice, that is also completely fair, and you're entitled to your opinion. That's it. Don't try and silence people having what is a respectful opinion on a topic. It only looks bad on you. Moving forwards, therefore, Arsenal's game against PSV, however, should go ahead this Thursday. They've spoken to, I believe, the policing around the potential game, and there's been no indication that the game should not go ahead. If they were to postpone it, it would be very difficult to see where they would even put this game. There's talk that the Everton game being postponed will go potentially as even far back as January, because there's literally no other moment to put it in the game in the schedule because of the World Cup. And so for that reason, it's going to be very hard to find when we're going to put these games in. Arsenal will effectively probably be playing 2 games a week for the foreseeable future once we return in October after this international break that we have at the end of September. So Arsenal will be in need of a dire kind of potential, a potential situation whereby we see more players coming in January, more youth players come in, because the squad is going to need to be thorough. It's going to need to be able to cope with the demands of 2 games a week for the foreseeable future. And that is a kind of thing that we need to get into for next season if we are going to qualify for the Champions League. Arsenal are going to have to use quality every single time, because they are not going to be able to rest players against the likes of Zurich or Bodo Glimt, or, in these types of games. With respect to those teams, Arsenal should be able to beat them with their second string sides. Arsenal are going to need next season to have a very, very strong squad and strength in depth throughout. And so technically this season, I suppose, you consider it, yeah, we should probably have that already to deal with the Premier League side of things. But I think that we need to be in a position where we're always going to be as competitive as possible. With the games postponed this weekend, it is, for me, a sign that Arsenal should certainly be going very strong against PSV. We should probably use our Premier League sides that would have played this weekend or next weekend against PSV. It makes very much sense to go and play the strongest team possible this Thursday. So I would expect Saka and Jesus, and if Partey's fit, to return, him to come back in, Saliba, Ben White, Ramsdale even potentially. I would expect the strongest team as possible to play that game on Thursday. PSV might be looking at it and going, well, damn, we were hoping they would probably rotate a couple of players. But no, I wouldn't want Arsenal to at this point. Arsenal should go full strength on Thursday and try to win the game as simply as possible. Now, interestingly, the 3 Gabbies, Gabriel Magalhaes, Gabriel Martinelli, and Gabriel Jesus, were all left out of the squad to face, of the Brazil squad, to face their European, or rather international fixtures over the course of the end of September. There is suggestions that this is being done to allow others into the squad to kind of fight for potential last places in the team, and that the likes of Jesus, Martinelli, and Gabriel Magalhaes should not be too concerned at this point about their place in the World Cup squad, and that Tite is using the opportunity to kind of play players off against one another that were kind of here or there about his selection. So if you're worried about these 3 not being included in the World Cup squad, don't be. They probably still all will be come November, or earlier than that, when we have to think October, when the final squads are named. But if they aren't in the squad for the World Cup, great. I'll be buzzing about that, because obviously we want to see the players fit and ready to go, and we don't want to see them facing potential injury, and they get a winter break, if you like. There is obviously some downsides of the winter break for players that aren't away, because they've then got they're out of football for like 6 weeks, and then they've got to get back into it, and it's kind of like a lull in your season unless you're playing more regularly in the World Cup. There's positives and benefits and negatives and cons to both. So it's interesting that all 3 of them have been left out, but there is a suggestion that all 3 of them will go back into it for the World Cup. But what it does mean is that we shouldn't have any injury issues, at least before the North London derby, unless there's any training issues with those 3. So positives and some strange news related to that one. Now, Cedric posted a tweet with Emile Smith Rowe suggesting that he and his teammate are working to get back as strong as possible. They don't look like they're wearing any kind of protective boots or, any kind of strappings or muscular supports in any way, which is a positive sign. Hopefully these 2 are just facing some minor setbacks. I believe that Smith Rowe's issue was a groin problem. I'm not sure what Cedric's was, but I think it was a very minor issue. They could potentially both be even back for the game against Tottenham, even though it's unlikely either of them would start that game. Having that depth in the squad is going to be really key. But we'll have to wait and see. Maybe even one of them will be back for the PSV game. We'll have to wait for Mikel Arteta's press conference. Sandro Tonali was linked with a move to Arsenal in the summer transfer window. However, it is expected that he will stay for the long term after he signed a new deal with AC Milan. So Arsenal search for a midfielder potentially in January, and in the summer transfer window is going to find a bit of a roadblock regarding potentially signing Tonali, as he's now signed a brand new contract with Milan. As you can see him sitting there with his representatives and Maldini, I believe that is on the left-hand side. Mudryk, the Shakhtar Donetsk and Ukrainian international, did a very, very interesting interview that I'm sure plenty of you have seen yesterday afternoon, or rather Thursday afternoon, in which he spoke to CBS Sports' Ben Jacobs, who, of course, we've had a number of times on the channel. He says, "My dream is to play in the Premier League. Of course, Arsenal is a very good team, very good manager. So from my side, I can't say no to Arsenal, but a transfer is not just up to my decision." Yes, well, and then David Ornstein rather funnily replied to Ben's tweet saying, "What have you done?" It is the thing that, you know, footballers are starting to be a little bit more open. Footballers are actually starting to speak to journalists about potential transfer moves, which has never really been something that's happened. It's been a bit of a taboo, I suppose, amongst the journalist kind of world, seeing players do one-on-one interviews while they're still with a current club, talking about potential transfers elsewhere. It's not the done thing. It's not a regular thing. And I think that when it comes to the potential to see players talk about their future, when it's talking about Arsenal, it's obviously positive, but also it could fall back on Arsenal in the sense that if we ever see a player being linked elsewhere and they start talking about their future in another club, it won't look so good. So again, another situation where there's pros and cons. But Mudryk, as we know, is a very exceptional talent playing currently for Shakhtar and had a great debut start in the Champions League the other night against RB Leipzig, getting a goal and an assist. Looks rapid, great kind of technique, good ball at his feet skills. Has been questioned about his final product, but in the game against RB Leipzig in particular, you know, I think that was excellent. Kind of the delivery and also the finish for his goal was top class. So if he can kind of replicate that kind of form into the future, it's only going to make teams like Arsenal find it harder not to be interested in trying to sign him. But will Arsenal return in January? Perhaps. Will they return in the summer? We'll have to wait and see. I think Marquinhos' situation could have a long-bearing impact on whether they move for a wide player. If Marquinhos continues to develop rather consistently and impressively, I would be surprised to see that happen. That completes all of today's stories, which means we're going to move to the part 2 of today's show and your questions in the chat box. So without further ado, it's time to tackle those. Do drop a like on the video if you haven't done so already. But we're going to be back after this very quick break. It is your last chance to get hold of the tickets for the Henry and Bergkamp shirt, because they could be gone by the time I try and talk about it once again tomorrow. There's only 21 left, so do not miss out on your opportunity. Link in the description down below to get involved. More information there as well. Let's go to the chat box then and see what you guys what questions you might have to answer. Let's go to Matt G. He says, "Tom, do you think we'll ever hear from Daniel Ek again about the potential takeover, or has that moment passed?" I think that moment's probably gone. You might hear him get some questions about it. You might hear him get some. He might be asked about if he's still interested. He would probably say yes if the opportunity ever comes up. I'm sure that he would be interested in buying Arsenal again because he's a fan. But the Cronkies have absolutely no intention of selling Arsenal Football Club, no intention of letting the club go, of selling assets. Arsenal is within the fabric now of KSE, to people's frustration, annoyance, irritation, gladness, maybe for some. You know, I think that the ownership since 2018 has certainly changed. I think since they've taken full ownership of the club, we've seen a lot more positive steps taken, a lot more money invested, and that's what people have asked for a very long time. Decision-making has still been questionable. The Super League in particular was a big, big no-no, and the fact that they turned around on that and admitted their wrongdoing is a positive again in itself, to admit that they've done a mistake and that they've changed their mind on that. But is it ever going to stop them from potentially getting involved in something else like that in the future? I highly, highly doubt it. My worry is if an Arsenal home game was to be played away from the Emirates. I know that Josh has promised that wouldn't happen, and he'd have to break that promise if he was to go and agree to that happening. It's something that happens in Spain. The Spanish Super Cup gets played in the Middle East, I believe. It's something that I never want to see happen for English football. English football doesn't need to do that. It's the richest league in the world. It's the richest country for football in the world. It does not need to indulge in any kind of away or fixtures, league fixtures or cup fixtures being played outside of the country. That would be so awful for fans and for, just the legitimacy of the sport, really, and the integrity of the English game. I would not want to see it. It's nothing to do with it. I've got an issue with it being in a specific country. Nothing like that. But it just shouldn't happen, in my view. The Spanish league should stay in Spain, and the French league and the French cups and the Italian cup should stay in their countries. That's why they are the Italian cup. The fact that the Spanish Super Cup is played elsewhere is just a real shame, real shame to take it away from those fans in their country. So yeah, that is a real shame. The Super League will still come, but every team will be allowed to get into it, says Ben Farrer. The Premier League and the Premier League teams would be fools to get involved with it because they currently are on this pedestal well above any other league in the world. And even for financial reasons, teams like Nottingham Forest have come up from the lower division, spending over £150 million on players. The reason they're able to do that is because of the money in the English game. If you don't see teams coming up from Liga Adelante or Serie B or Ligue 2, like you just don't see it happening, or the Bundesliga Zwei? No. Is it Zwei? I think it's Zwei. Dry is free. Yeah. So I think that you just don't see that and the money being spent. So they would be mad to get involved with the Super League, to be honest, in my opinion. But who knows? You might be right, Ben. It might still end up happening. 1300 Scarface says, would you rather have Mykhaylo Mudryk or Kvicha Kvaratskhelia? I think. You know who I mean. The guy who's playing, I think, for Napoli at the moment. Looks quite good. Yeah. Mudryk still. I know more about Mudryk, so I've not really got the best answer for you, but Mudryk, I think, is potentially a better talent to get for the money. I think that Kvaratskhelia will cost a significant amount. And now he's moved to Napoli in an Italian league, and Napoli are notoriously difficult to negotiate with. I don't see why they would let him go for anything less than a ridiculous fee either. Cryptico says, why have Brazil dropped all of our players? If you scroll back about 10 minutes, mate, you'll see me talking about that. Rich F says, what about the NFL games played here, Tom? We as fans in the UK love it. I mean, I'm not a big NFL fan, so I can't really connect in the same way, but I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. If you're taking the game away from, I don't know, I'm trying to think of NFL teams now. LA, you're going to ruin me. LA Rams, if the LA Rams, which I know is an ironic example because they were taken away from St. Louis. So yeah, it's an irony. And I just think it should stay. Pre-season games are for, these types of tours, these types of movements elsewhere. And so if it's a pre-season NFL game, great, go do it. Or if you're going to create kind of an entire new game, for instance, like an entire new tournament. So there's a new competition called, like, I don't know, the US Cup. And, that's, I suppose it just sounds like something that would be a preseason tournament anyway. But you know what I mean? That's kind of where it is. So Javier says, would you go watch an NFL or an NBA game in London? Honestly, I don't like either sport. So no, I've gone to Madison Square Garden. I've watched the Knicks play. I didn't enjoy it. I'm not a basketball fan. It was just kind of one of those things. I'd never really seen basketball before. I'm just not a fan of the sport. It was a nothing game, to be fair, at like the end of the season. So it was never going to be anything amazing. But yeah, no, I wouldn't have EA. And look, I know that what the question's designed to do. It's designed to say, oh, well, if you were going to do that, surely that's okay. I get what you're trying to do. I just think that for me, the tournaments, the home games, the cup competitions that have been ingrained in English sport should stay in England. Sounds so Brexit, doesn't it? But it's just, for me, preseason tournaments, great. Go do them elsewhere. Go get the tours. Go spread that kind of commercial side of things. Go play games elsewhere in the world and stuff like that. And you have the Club World Cup as well, which is held across the world too. But yeah, no, I'm just not a fan of it. Just not. Bo says, well, it is the Knicks, true. But I mean, even just the sport, I can't. There's something about a sport where the goal, like, either be it like my other half plays netball, and I reluctantly, but of course, as it is my duty, go along to watch it sometimes. There's something about sports where the goal is too easy to get that I can't quite grasp that same drama. So like basketball scores are crazy. Rugby, I'm not too into rugby either, but like the scoring system, like a goal in a game at the top level of football, it's the hardest thing to do is score a goal. But it's almost like the easiest thing to do in like netball or basketball is to score. I'm probably using the wrong terminology in some cases. And actually the hardest thing to do in those sports sometimes is to stop the other team scoring. So yeah, it's just not for me. And that's fine. Everyone's entitled to do what they want and watch what they want. That doesn't make me any less or more of a human being, And if you like basketball, good for you. Great. Go do it. Go watch it. Deep Gooner says, do you watch any other sport? Yeah, I do. F1, which I know ironically and contradictory might seem so boring to people, but I quite like the drama and the politics that go alongside F1, kind of keeping up with the story of the season. That's quite interesting. I suppose you can probably apply that to other sports as well. Tennis, I'm quite a big tennis fan, and tennis is an interesting sport. I'm going off a huge tangent here, but I suppose we are in the middle of a bit of a footballing drought, so this is going to happen. But the technique and the skill, with tennis, I just enjoy the different types of shots taken. I don't know why I like tennis more, and there's not really a goal in tennis either. Like, there's not like a target. You just have to stop your opponent from reaching the ball, I suppose, with different types of shots. But yeah, it's there you go. Wow says, yeah, you see more crazy moments in football than basketball, especially with 7-game series. Upsets are much harder than a 1-game final like the Champions League. Yeah, it's just my preference. Sam says, Tom, you say that with NFL and NBA they should stay, but football is traveling on planes all over Europe. So how is it any different? I mean, they're traveling all over Europe, Sam, because it's a European competition. If you had a global competition, I've no problem with it. I think you may have misinterpreted, Sam, what I'm talking about. I'm talking about English Football League games or English Cup games being played outside of England, the same way that the Spanish Super Cup is played in the Middle East. Like, I don't agree with it. I don't think that should happen. If you want to create a Middle East like tournament that includes Spanish and Italian and whatever else teams, then sure, go do that in the off season. Go create it. But don't take the Spanish Super Cup outside of Spain. Don't take the English Community Shield outside of England. Don't do it. That's not what I'm about. So, Sam, I think you've probably misinterpreted what I'm talking about. Byron says, Tom, did you enjoy Marquinhos crying out when he scored? His passion makes me proud as a Gooner. Yeah, it was great. It was a great moment. I don't know what hardships Marquinhos has gone through, but you hear stories about Brazilian and South American players in particular and the things that they have to go through to get their careers to where they are. So I remember the story of Alexis Sanchez, when we got to the cup final against Aston Villa and they did that exclusive kind of around where he'd come through these tiny Chilean towns and villages and how he'd gone back and donated and built basically so much stuff there because of his career. That stuff's great. So yeah, there you go. Diapolon says, regarding tennis as a Norwegian, I can't believe that Casper Ruud could be the world's number one. Yeah, crazy that. Tennis is, that's just, I'm not like wildly into it, to be honest. I only usually watch like when Wimbledon's on or something like that, but I like tennis. I play tennis if I can play it. But nothing ever compares to football for me. But it probably goes like football, F1, tennis. I'm trying to think of anything else that I really watch sports. But to be honest, that's those three. Football, F1, tennis are probably the ones for me. Steve says, "Wow, that's fair enough." After saying that, though, I personally wouldn't like to see English football go through the mud again when the boos ring out during a minute silence. I suppose you've come and joined us a bit later, Steve. So, yeah, I know what you're saying, but I think that also there's a strong point to say that during that minute silence, it's an opportunity that a lot of people wouldn't have got otherwise during this weekend to pay tribute in their own way of however they may have wanted to. If other people wanted to boo or make noise, that's down to them, and they can do what they like. But it's an opportunity that has been missed, I think. So, yeah. Just Sheldon says 4-hour matches for the semi-finals. What sport we were talking about? We're talking about tennis, because you can get 4-hour matches for like any round of that. They're kind of ridiculously long games of tennis. Like when it gets to like 5 sets and then you get to a tie break, there's no tie break in the 5th set, and it just goes until someone wins. It can take a long time. Axel says, I hate that Premier League isn't played in Norway, so I could buy a season ticket. But I totally agree with you, Tom. Why do we always have a need to change everything? Money needs to relax. So there you go. And go Casper, indeed. Gooner 8 says, do you ever get a lion? I'm a morning person, so I don't need one. Sometimes I do. I mean, I was up at 6 this morning having to take the missus to the train station. So, it's not a problem, me getting up now to sort out the show. And to be honest, whilst I've got this opportunity to say now, next week on the 17th, I, of course, will be heading off on the honeymoon. Now, I am putting in a lot of work, fingers crossed, to continue to bring you content at 8 a.m. No, I'm not going to be recording shows whilst I'm out on my honeymoon. That would be crossing a line, I think. But I am going to be doing a lot of pre-recording. The fact that we don't have the games against Everton and Brentford probably make it easier to do this pre-recorded content, because I'm not really going to be missing much besides the PSV game. So there'll be shows that have been recorded before the PSV game. But the idea of a lot of those shows is to talk about more evergreen content, if you like. Things like tier lists of how the players have performed so far this season. Probably going to record that on the Friday, because then I'll have the PSV game to reference as well. Things like the evolution of Mikel Arteta, building the perfect Arsenal team, January transfer stuff, loan reports on the players that have played so far this season. We're going to be doing lots of that. That stuff. And there's going to be some great guests lined up as well. I'm not going to tell you who just yet, because just in case schedules change and guests can't come on. But some really good guests are lined up for the honeymoon series, we'll call it, from the 17th, well, probably the 18th through to the 28th. I can probably do a show on the 17th in the morning, but then all the way from the 18th through to the 28th, we're going to continue to bring you 8 a.m. shows. I'll make sure they're premieres. So what that means is basically it's like a live show. So the chat box will be active. So you'll be able to jump into the chat and discuss with the people that you usually jump into, but it won't be live. So you won't be able to ask me questions and stuff like that, because the show would have already been recorded, but it will be going out with the chat box available during the 8 a.m. stuff. So I'll schedule them for 8 a.m. Yeah, you'll be able to get plenty of content still whilst I'm away. That is the plan. I'm just hoping that it all works out and that all of my plans kind of come together and it works. So apologies if it doesn't, but hopefully it should all be fine and ready to go. GG2 Few says, hi, Tom. Do you think we could benefit from having this weekend off, allowing injured players to recover for games we may need them for in the future? Yes, this is a potential benefit, of course. You're absolutely right. That said, I do feel as though we had the players available to beat Everton and not worry about it. And now we're going to have to worry about that game probably in a midweek fixture that we probably wouldn't have had a game later on in the season. Brentford, maybe less so. Brentford's a tough game away from home, as plenty of teams have found out, including ourselves. We would benefit from having someone like Thomas Partey or potentially a January signing available for that game. We won't, because it's not going to go ahead from the sounds of things. But yeah, there are. So Partey should be back, fully fit, rested, available. Bukayo Saka should get plenty more rest ahead of the Spurs game. There's going to be opportunities. I think that we're going to see some behind closed doors games played during the international break. I think Arteta will be probably setting plenty of those up so that we've got fixtures going for players like the Gabbies, who are still going to be here, and like plenty of other players that aren't going away with their international teams. So I think we're going to see plenty of that as well. We are going to wrap things up there. We will be back tomorrow morning, of course, with the next 8 a.m. show. I'm probably going to be doing a preview show for PSV back on Tuesday, but tomorrow 8 a.m. show, rounding up any massive news that happens to drop in the next 24 hours, and of course keeping you up to date with all things Arsenal. Do drop a like on the video, do subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, up the Arsenal.